One thing I've been thinking a lot about recently is how easy it is to celebrate the successes that someone has been through, the brand, the awards, and the message that says, young founder has found a wellness business. And it's really easy to sing the praises of the outcome. But before all of that, there are the roots, the dinner table conversations, the stories from the grandparents, and all the things that we've inherited about risk, about business, and about the values that we're going to carry forward. And even those cultural contradictions that so many of us are navigating. Because the truth is, especially with people from immigrant families, we're not born with success ingrained in us, and it doesn't just come from a startup or business book. A lot of the time, it's absorbed and observed through the influences that shaped the way that we have perspectives and values before we even realized it was happening. So today's conversation isn't just about how to build a wellness and supplement company. It's all about those things that we inherited, from the way that we understood business, to the things that we learned about diet, to the way that we value risk. And today's guest, honestly, is one of the most exciting people that I've ever thought about having on, and I'm genuinely meaning that. The CEO and co-founder of FreeSoul, Arjun Sofat. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on. I'm super excited.
A lot of the people who will know your story will already know how much your roots and influence have played a role in everything that you stand for, and you're not afraid to talk about how much of an influence that's had. But I want to start this conversation quite differently to how I normally do. And I'm going to start with a question that I normally ask at the end.
Okay.
So if you strip back FreeSoul and take it all away from the awards, the numbers, the metrics, in 30 or 40 years' time, when someone mentions your name, what is it that you'd like them to say?
I think it really depends on who it is that's saying it. Obviously, when it comes to my family, I think that the natural instinct is just to be known as someone that has been there and done their duty, if you like, from a roots perspective. So by that, I mean, set a great example for my kids, worked really hard. And that's totally distinct to driving numbers or doing anything like that. It's demonstrating things like work ethic, values, just setting a great example, obviously being a great partner to my wife, being a great son to my parents. So those are the things that really matter to me when it comes to my personal life. When it comes to business, I think it all boils down to impact. So have you had a career and a business or a business involvement that brings some positive change to the world? That would be great if I was known for that.
With the first one that you mentioned about the positive impact, where do you think you were taught that?
So I was in school and one of my best friend's fathers ran or worked in a care home business. And where I grew up, not too far from where you grew up, a lot of my friends were starting shisha bars, or they were DJing in clubs, or they were doing some other stuff. And my friend's dad said to us in the car, if you ever go into business, business should have a positive impact on people's lives. And that never escaped me for some reason. He said it in passing. I'd only met this uncle a few times, but that really, really struck a chord with me, because I thought, you know what, he's right. There are 100 different ways that you can do business or start trading or whatever it might be. But what an amazing thing to do if you can do that while having a positive impact on the world. So that's where that's come from.
I can really resonate with that concept, and it made me think while you were saying that about why I'm geared towards that way as well. And you hear a lot of people talk about redefining success, right? When they go from what they might have understood success to be when they're a teenager, and then suddenly they start a job because it was the natural direction to take. So you used to work in investment banking. I also worked in banking and left that. And when I heard you talk about that, it made me think of the people around me who haven't had that same mindset that I do. So a lot of the people that I grew up with, we had the same education, very similar interests. They're still some of my closest friends, but they're so content and set in their corporate line of work, and they're doing really well. And, congratulations to them. They found that contentment. But somewhere in that, I started to think different. And I was trying to piece together where that came from. And if I bring it back to the influence of the roots and culture, what I saw in a lot of their own family backgrounds is they came from a lineage of other very successful corporate workers, right? So I now work as an actuary, and my dad and granddad were both accountants. Or one of my friends went on to be a medic, and he comes from a lineage of doctors, right? So it's, yes, there's you can't be what you can't see, but there's also when I think when your metrics of success is hooked on what you see when you grow up, you tend to stick to that way. Is that something that you either resonate with, or do you see where the influences of your background played a role like that?
100%. I think you struck the nail on the head there. So in my life, growing up, there were two massive influences on the way I thought about business and also life. So one is my grandmother. My grandma encountered financial difficulties when she was in her 50s in India. And the way in which she got herself out of that situation was ultimately through business. And so she started importing furniture from Europe and placed it around our house. And everything had these little labels on there. And my mom and I would joke and say, one day Nani's going to put a label on us if someone pays enough. But
Yeah.
obviously she didn't do that. And she ended up inviting people to her house, selling this furniture. And then she went from there to opening these showrooms.
Wow.
And she became one of the first women in India to start a business during that time on a national scale, which is something I'm incredibly proud of. But it's not the business achievement, it's more the fact that she used business to create safety for her family and just get them out of a bad place. So that was one massive impact. And the other massive impact came from my granddad, so my dad's dad, so my dadaji, for those familiar with the term. And essentially his big dream was, I want to become a bus driver in London. And apparently he had posters of buses and red buses in his bedroom growing up and all that stuff.
Was that more a fascination with the London image and how the bus represents a lot of the London culture, or was there?
I think it was more the fact that they were in Kenya at the time,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a particularly safe place to be, and it wasn't a place where people had democratized access to opportunity to improve their sense of well-being and to be able to continue to progress in life. So he wanted to be in a country that was democratic and was more opportune, and that was the UK. And being a bus driver just felt like an honest day's work and something that he felt was aspirational versus his current day situation. And so he ended up saving up all this money to, go and take his family to London and get all the qualifications and all that stuff. But when he got to the airport with his tickets, he realized that actually in those days you could sell your tickets. And so he ended up selling all the tickets that he had saved up so much for and started up a tour operating business where he would buy tickets, sell them and flip them. And that became a tour operating business. And because of that, he never got the chance to become a bus driver, but he was able to send his family to the UK and made that sacrifice to afford them a better quality of life while he made the sacrifice of being back in Kenya and trying to provide in that way. And equally, while that was happening, his wife, my grandmother, made an enormous sacrifice in essentially raising a family alone. So that was an incredible thing to see as well, just that female resilience from her, as well as the sacrifice my granddad made. And through both of those individuals, I basically got to see that business can have such a positive impact on your family.
Yeah.
But also imagine if you could extend that outwards and have a positive impact on other people. And obviously FreeSoul has that today, which is something I'm super proud of.
You clearly know so much about the positive impact that what they did had. Knowing that that has fed directly into ultimately the legacy that's being passed down, did you ever feel the pressure to almost contribute to that legacy and do something that could deliver a positive impact like what they did?
Honestly, not really. I never had this inclination to follow anyone's footsteps. It was
Yeah.
never something that I particularly wanted to do. But I think at the very core of it, I joined this corporate world and I sort of thought to myself, is this it? Like, I've worked so hard in school, I've really dedicated myself, and is this all there is? It wasn't that pushed me to leave the job, but I do remember feeling quite dissatisfied. But that was a great lesson to learn. I remember the environment not being the most healthy in all honesty back in those days. And Katie's in the audience today, so hopefully she's nodding while I say this. But I think it taught me how to be really good to people and be respectful, because I experienced the antithesis of that in my time during investment banking, where people were not managed with respect. And at FreeSoul, that's something that we really care about. So we work hard, we try and drive the best results we can, but by being kind human beings.
I think the way that you run the business, I had the fortune of visiting the offices, and I can see, having met you before that, I can see how the way that you are, how you bring yourself out in LinkedIn and other podcasts that you've done, it really does trickle down into the way that the staff culture is, the way that they feel comfortable. And I think, culture in one part is something that we inherit through the social norms of our parents, but that translates just as equally to how it comes to business. Before we get into that, the early stories that you had of discipline, if I remember rightly, when you did leave banking, you were driving around in a borrowed car to drop off samples of it because that was part of the graft that you did. Again, looking at where that kind of hard work and ethic comes from, because again, you're in a banking job, and yes, it didn't fulfill you, but you get used to a certain lifestyle of being paid, yes, putting in the hours, but I assume the graft that you were putting in those early days.
Yeah, I think Barclays definitely instilled a great sense of work ethic in me, and also in all the people that I was with. So we'd get to work, I don't know, 8, 9 in the morning, but we would never leave before 1, 2 in the morning the following day. And so in my first year, I don't think on a single occasion I left work on the same day that I got to work. And so while that wasn't particularly efficient, it does build rhino skin.
Yeah.
And so you take that into business and you take those lessons. But I would say that I've been lucky in the sense of I've always been quite a disciplined person. Even in school, I worked very hard for my exams. I was in the cricket team, trained very hard, all that good stuff. So it's not particularly something that I have struggled with, but Barclays definitely enhanced it for sure. So those early days where we had to wake up 4 in the morning, drive to the other side of London, hand out samples all day long, couldn't afford to move stock around. So we'd load up my mates' cars with protein powder and just drive around and hand out samples. Yeah, it was really tough, but it was also special. Like, I look back on those days with fond memories because it was just a foundation of what was to come, which I'm really grateful for, because it allowed me to know my consumer and just be part of a very cool, positive industry.
You mentioned about, even the discipline coming from those early years, coming from a culture of Asian parents, right, where hard work and discipline is just part of growing up and extra education, all that. There's an interesting stat that I found where there's research that showed that children of entrepreneurs are 1.3 to 3 times more likely to become entrepreneurs themselves, right? And that's, again, seeing that in your influence from an early age. But the discipline angle, do you think discipline is something that is inherited?
Do I think discipline is something that is inherited? To an extent. I think if you have people around you, and that doesn't necessarily need to be your parents, it could be your friends, they all dedicate themselves, they work hard, they're setting a good example, they're seeing the results of it, that's going to rub off on you 100%. But do I think it's something that you're born with? I'm not too sure, but I believe you can work on it. Absolutely. There are things where I could work 24/7, 7 days a week, not literally 24/7, but I could work 100-hour weeks and be totally fine. But if you ask me to, I don't know, tidy the house every single day, I'm going to really struggle, because it's just not something that comes naturally to me. That's also a form of discipline, just like having that sense of routine and discipline at home, as an example. But my desk is a mess at home. I don't have that discipline, but I also love what I do. So I don't require motivation to come to the office.
It doesn't feel like a discipline act.
No, and there's this phrase that Michael Phelps uses. He says, enthusiasm is common, but endurance is rare. It's really easy to show up for work when you feel like it. It's really easy to put in the graft when you're full of energy and your Whoop score is 98%. But what do you do when it's 20%?
Yeah.
That's what defines whether you can go all the way in terms of maximizing your potential and just giving it your best shot, because success is not guaranteed, and no matter how talented you are. But half of it, I believe, is just showing up every single day and working hard and dedicating yourself.
It's funny, I was listening to something earlier and it was talking about the knock-on effects of discipline, and the phrase was discipline begets discipline. And it's, everyone will have experienced this in some regard. When you do wake up early, say if you have a nice morning routine and then you get into the gym, and then you're more likely to then eat better because you've started your day off well, and then it goes onto the rest of the day where it's like, well, my day has started so well, I'm going to carry on and work really hard in the morning. Whereas when you maybe sleep in, or you've had a late night and then you skip the morning bit, you're more likely to fault on the next bits, not just because you're behind schedule, but just because you've fallen off the wagon a bit with the discipline, that there's definite momentum behind it that it carries forward, right? And if you, to some part, and again, not limiting it to immigrant families, but going back to the point that some of them have had to work so hard. And often, I've had a lot of guests on this podcast where they talk about their knowing their grandparents to have waken up at 5 a.m. and to be out of the door. Their grandparents, not even their parents. And I guess when you see that kind of work ethic around you, you get used to the idea of like it. Yes, there is a reason to wake up at 5 or 6 or 7 a.m., whatever it may be, and then kick off the day, and you have to do that every day. The only difference is, I don't know who said it originally, but Chris Williamson said it, and he said that my parents had the problem of survival, and I have the problem of self-actualization. So we benefit from the fact that a lot of the time we don't have to put in the graft because of a need for survival, right, for our family or our kids, which a lot of our ancestors had to do. But it doesn't mean that we don't face our own internal problems that we're trying to deal with that get us out of bed in the morning. And going back to your idea of positive impact, that is a form of self-actualization where I've come to realize that for me, I am motivated and driven and enjoy doing something that is going to create a positive impact. So if I don't do that, that's going to be a problem for me. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning and creates that discipline.
Yeah. It's about your why, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think an incredible thing for anyone to do, regardless of whether you're into entrepreneurship or you're not, or you want to fulfill a career goal, is to just ask yourself why. Fundamentally, why is it that I want to do this? What is it that I want? Because otherwise you really struggle to answer the question of what should you be doing. And you need a filter through which you can pass your decisions through to understand whether the consequences of those decisions are in alignment with what it is you're trying to achieve. So yeah, totally. Like if you find that discipline through having a positive impact, or if it is survival, or if it's your kids, or if it's your wife or your husband, knowing that is half the battle, because then you can hone in on it. So I totally agree with you.
I want to show you a picture which you'll be really familiar with. Anyone who knows your story will know this picture. And this picture is quite a well-known one. But what does this picture mean to you?
It's really fun, to be honest, to look back on those times, because we did not have a clue about what we were doing that day. So that's a photo shoot in my local gym, right by my parents' house. My mum and I just went there to like help out, move the weights, and help the photographer, help the model with whatever they needed help with. And it was just the two of us. And it's some of the most fun memories I could ever ask for. And it's built a really close bond with me and my mum as well. So yeah, that picture is awesome. It means everything.
Yeah, for those who are listening and are not watching in, it's a picture of Arjun with his mum Rohini in there. How early days?
I think that was probably 2018. So maybe a year after the business started, something like that. So we needed content for social media. The model there is someone called Georgia who went to that gym. So I just messaged her saying, hey, do you want to do a shoot? And the photographer is one of my friends, and we just made it happen on the day. And that went on the website the very same day. And that's how the business was back then. So super simple.
She was a huge driving force behind why FreeSoul exists. But also, I think what's so special is having a parent who is not just supportive of your dream of creating something, but is basically alongside you doing the hard work as well. I think was she fitting bathrooms to also?
Yeah, so I mean, initially when the business started, we tried to find a manufacturer that could help us just create the formulas that our nutritionist created. And the trouble we had was this concept of MOQs. So MOQs stand for minimum order quantities. And typically we were hearing like numbers 25,000, 50,000 units. And there was no way we could afford to buy that much stock. And then we found a husband and wife team that was willing to take a bet on us, and their MOQ was a lot more reasonable. So we went in, we tried these formulas, and we absolutely loved them. And I remember me and my mum were saying, yeah, this is so great. People are going to love it. They're definitely going to buy it. I know so-and-so who's going to buy loads of this stuff. And that was such a mistake, because obviously the manufacturer increased their prices off the back of that reaction to the point where we could no longer afford any stock to buy for the business. So we had to start a side business on top of the business that hadn't even started. And that was essentially a decorating company where my mum would do kitchens, I would do cupboards, and we would try and decorate flats. And the money we got together, we'd put together back into stock. So yeah, it wouldn't have been possible without her, which is so special.
I mean, that was going to be the follow-up question, which is, clearly she is as much of a driving force behind what FreeSoul stands for and its success as you are. But going above and beyond what was needed to make it happen, if she wasn't there to do that, do you think FreeSoul would have?
No, because it's her story and her involvement in the business is as essential as essential of an ingredient as mine. And so without her involvement, her pushing, her trying the products, her talking to all of her female friends, and ultimately being the female voice within FreeSoul for so many years, we just wouldn't have existed. So no, definitely not.
And the reason I asked that is because I think there'll be a lot of people who have either heard your story, who are listening to this, and can really resonate with the idea of wanting to make a positive impact. I think going back to that self-actualization point, a lot of people of our generation, the younger generation, are now facing that same issue where, less than ever people want to work in those corporates. Doesn't matter what the salary is, but the thing they might not have, or the question for that question that David, who's sitting at home right now, or Rahul, or I'm thinking of very old school names, but you get the point. They firstly need to figure out what it is that they're passionate about. But that aside, they either don't have the support at all from their family or community because they come from a background where they can't understand this level of risk taking. Or even if they do kind of have the support, they don't have the same hands-on support. What do you say to those people who might be facing the struggle of challenging the status quo of the community or the family they grew up in?
Do you know who Charlie Munger is?
I know the name.
So Warren Buffett's right-hand man.
Yes.
So Charlie Munger said the best thing that you can do is make friends with the imminent dead. And by that, he meant read lots of books from successful people from previous times. Just because you can't see it physically doesn't mean you can't mentally understand something. And so if you're able to read, listen to, study entrepreneurs of past years, or even current modern day entrepreneurs, like listening to podcasts that are informative, you can get that inspiration you need. Just because it's not in your family doesn't mean you can't do it. You can be the first person in your family to do X, Y, or Z. So I don't think that it's necessary to see it firsthand. You can still learn it firsthand, which is just as valuable. So that's number one. Number two is you need to understand really clearly why. I think being a founder nowadays is quote unquote cool.
Yeah.
It's not that cool in reality. Like there's a lot of graft, there's a ton of sacrifice. I'm 8 years in, I'm still working. Yesterday I worked 14 hours. Like it's just normal. I've worked every weekend this year. So the sacrifices don't stop. And therefore you need to really understand what it is that is driving you. And if it's not powerful enough, that's a problem. It can't just be because I want to post on Instagram. There are a ton of people I know who are probably on that road where they're doing it because it looks cool. That's not strong enough, because when things get hard, and they always do in every single business, looking cool is not a strong enough pull to keep you going. It needs to be something very strong internally, but ideally something outside of you that you're working for. And for us, knowing that we're working for our community to make women healthier up and down the country is such a strong pull, not just for me, but for everyone in the business. It's very easy to get passionate about the impact and the work that we're doing, even when things get hard.
I think you've also hit the nail on the head. And something which you'll hear a lot in different forms is the idea of follow your purpose and not someone else's, right? Create your own blueprint. Don't lead someone else's life. But I think to the point that you're mentioning, when people do try and replicate the way that someone that they look up to is doing what they're doing, right? So if it's someone who sees what you're doing and wants to do what you've done because it's cool that you are the guy who's doing something in women's health. Yes, it might be a passion of theirs, but if they're trying to follow the same blueprint that you are, they are not going to put in the same level of graft through the pain when those times come, right? And I think one of the formulas of success is it boils down to how much pain are you willing to go through, especially when it comes to founder and entrepreneur-led business. And I think it's very easy to follow someone's trajectory when you're experiencing the successes, but when the natural roadblocks and hurdles come.
Absolutely, yeah. Entrepreneurship is full of peaks and valleys, right? So when things are going well, you're right at the peak, it's euphoric. But when you're at the lows, it's very challenging as well, because a lot of the time there's no one within the business that you can necessarily turn to. And that's very isolating and that's difficult. So you need to wonder whether that's for you or not. And I think it's worth spending genuine time thinking through what your life is likely to be like before and after. It just guides you in the right way.
This point around isolation. So taking it back to even before it's to the point of success.
Yeah.
And again, I haven't coined the term, but this phase of life called the lonely chapter. And when you've started off however many years, especially coming from somewhere where you've gone into investment banking, but even before that, you led a trajectory where you went to school and then qualified and then got that job. You would have had a certain tribe that shaped who you were in those early years. And this lonely chapter is when you start to separate yourself from the influences that shaped you for all of those years. A couple of things happen. Firstly, naturally, your time gets absorbed in stuff that was different to what it was when you were with them. So you have less time to do the things that you were doing with the tribe that once formed you, whether it's friends, family, acquaintances, colleagues. But also, they will start to separate themselves from you, either because they can no longer relate to you and what you're doing, and vice versa, or they start to see that, oh, hang on, this guy thinks he's better than us, doing things that he used to do with us that he no longer does. So again, if it's, hey, Arjun, do you want to come and, we're going to go and watch the football this weekend? And all of a sudden, you'd have to start saying, I can't make it. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm going to drop off these boxes. That lonely chapter is a phase that I don't know what the metric is, but I imagine the overwhelming majority of people who step out of their comfort zone and do that thing that a lot of people talk about and don't do, and then try and follow their passion, are going to experience. For you, did you experience that lonely chapter phase, and how did you or do you navigate it?
I think there are two parts. One is how you look at that. I remember for the longest time, purely coincidentally, I had this screensaver on my phone and it said, your elevation requires your isolation. And it was a helpful frame of mind to just keep there, to remind myself that you need to just be there, be at your desk, be working. You can't go do X, Y, Z and try and run a business and try and scale at the same time. So it was just a reminder of that sacrifice, that to elevate, you have to isolate. And I still remain very faithful to that saying. But for me, if I'm being really honest, it's not that difficult because I've been with my wife since we were 17. Like the ideal evening for me is just at home, chilling, dinner. It's no big deal. I don't have this desire to go to a club or to a bar. Like I'm very much a homely person. And therefore, the concept of having to sacrifice my social life was actually quite welcoming. I experienced it in a different way. So my friends would be going out and they'd be going on holiday, and all of my savings were in stock.
Right.
So I couldn't afford to do any of those things. And I remember having a salary and then suddenly not having one for a very long time. It was that FOMO of a sense of security that I felt in a big way, because that's very unnerving to not have any regular income coming in. I felt a certain way about that for sure. But the actual isolation bit, I honestly didn't find it that hard. I'm generally quite an introverted person. So having to not go out and not meet 100 people was no problem for me. That wasn't that difficult. But that's just my way of doing things. There are other people. So I was with someone called Mark yesterday who runs a company called Suri. And Mark believes heavily in the impact of relationships and building network. And he's just naturally that way. And I don't think that he's become successful in the same way. He's probably built 100 bridges with 1,000 different founders, and opportunities have come his way. And that's brilliant. And I can probably take some lessons from his journey. So I don't think it's extreme either way, but you do have to an extent, play to your strengths.
One of the points that I think links it back to the culture is that the culture that we come from, and a lot of it's influenced by, it's not just isolate of our own culture, South Asian culture, but kind of the backstories that we've experienced. if I take my personal example, there's been 2 generations of migration moves. So grandparents went from India to East Africa by choice, and then parents went from East Africa to UK
Yeah.
not by choice.
Yeah.
But still, in that process, one of the values that I think that has been passed down is work hard, but not just work hard, but keep your head down. Don't make too much fuss and work hard, because ultimately, when you're going from India to Africa, you're a minority. When you were going from Africa to the UK, you were a double generation minority, right? And a lot of them did really well, but they did well a lot of the time by basically not making a fuss, because they're already a minority, and they probably felt that, I mean, it wasn't their choice to go to the UK. They got kicked out, and then UK accepted them in. So it was, okay, we're in a place that we've been invited into and given a second chance. So let's just work hard. And obviously the, prejudices and all that. Part of that way of thinking can also be passed down, of just keep your head down and don't make too much fuss. So there's 2 layers to this, which I want to get into. One is the fact that you decided to be one of those that was going to break the status quo of, getting a nice 9 to 5 job and following that route. And then also, heavily, your work involves putting yourself out there on social media. So it's the opposite of keeping your head down. And, part of what the business is, and a lot of the way that marketing is going nowadays, you have to put yourself out there. So did you face any, I don't know, raised eyebrows from family or community or people of our cultural understanding, especially, parents' generation? I mean, your mum is obviously the biggest advocate, but were there other uncles or aunties or just community that maybe didn't get it?
Yeah, 100%. I think there are 2 parts. One is with regards to don't make a fuss. So my mom encapsulates that massively. So I remember calling her up, and this wasn't even that long ago. It was maybe a year ago. And I had just come off like the most intense period, one of the most intense periods of the FreeSoul journey. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember I was shattered. And I called my mum up and I was like, Mum, I am so tired. I don't think I'm going to work tomorrow. And it was Saturday the next day. And she was like, don't be ridiculous. Like, do you remember when we had no work? And you're complaining now that you have so much work. Don't be ridiculous. Like, get to work. And some may perceive that to be an unhealthy comment. But actually, for me, I think that was one of the most refreshing perspectives on the situation, because what I found very, very difficult was the early days of having no work, no sales, none of that. So often when things get intense, you can slip into a negative mindset, but just reframing that is really helpful. It's not for everyone, but to your point around don't make a fuss, perfect example of that. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. The second bit of your question was around, what was that around? Sorry.
Keeping your head down. And so
Yes, I haven't really done that. Well, I have done that in regards in large part. I don't think I've done much of the founder story stuff. I only tend to get involved in things where I genuinely feel aligned to the values of the host or the LinkedIn piece or whatever it might be, or where I think I can add value. I've only done the whole founder story PR stuff for maybe a year now, if not less. But that means there were 7-8 years where I basically didn't say anything online. There's not too much out there. For us, it's FreeSoul has never ever been about me and never will be. The way in which we're telling the story now is to just invite our community in to understand why we do what we do. But FreeSoul fundamentally isn't about me, and it's not about my mum either. It's about our community. And so I never felt the need to put myself out there to a massive extent. I prefer keeping my head down. I don't enjoy the spotlight. It's just not my character. But I think that's fine. I think the common misconception is if you want to start business, you have to somehow become a celebrity. It's just not true. There are plenty of successful businesses out there who don't have a face of the brand. Who's the founder of Patagonia?
True.
It doesn't come to mind.
Yeah.
Who's the founder of Uniqlo? Shoe Dog, Phil Knight. Okay, now people know who the founder of Nike is, but that's not how they came up. They idolized the athlete. And it's the same thing that we're doing, whereas it's not an athlete, it's a community member. So if you're an introverted person, you don't want to be on camera, you don't want to do all this kind of stuff, it's totally fine. You can still be successful. there are so many examples of successful founders that no one has ever heard of.
Yeah.
And if you want to put your face out there, that's great too. People relate to it. It allows you to tell your story. It's quote unquote free marketing, and it's fun. But you don't have to choose that route. It can be the other.
To this point of keeping your head down and not making a fuss, I think what goes against some of the cultural values that we get taught is, you know, if you look in India, especially the yes sir thing, right? Say yes and then get on with it. Yes, that's a comedic value point around the concept, but it's still the idea that say yes in the respect of be agreeable. If you get given more work, take on more work. And again, I think that's more generationally, but I think, all of those founders that you mentioned, and even what you've done and previous guests that I've had, I've always noticed the trait of there has to be a certain element of rebellion, and that involves challenging what exists. So what you did with in the early days, your message was that not your only message, but your message was that the current wellness and supplement industry is very geared towards men, and the marketing is around that. And the gap you're feeling is there's just not the right nutrients and marketing that supports the women's wellness side of it. And you're very focused on that. But then there's also the rebellion of no matter how many times you hear no, you won't stop. Where does that rebelliousness, either within you or as the general sort of founder trait, where does that come from?
I think it's just conviction. So if you think something is important enough, you will keep going. So I remember the first time we tried to raise investment, I created this nice pitch deck because that's what you learn in the corporate world. The logos were perfectly aligned. Everything was really nice. And then I went into this hotel, which was very near the office. At the office, I say the office, it was my house at the time. And I went in, I had this pitch deck, and the guy looked at it and just literally laughed. And there's a phrase being laughed out the room.
Yeah.
I experienced that in very literal terms because he laughed and then I had to leave the room. And it was so horrendous. And you can get knocked down by these things. But if something is important to you, you just keep doing it. And whether that's rebellion or a sense of conviction or just being stubborn or just believing in your vision, you have to have that. It's an essential ingredient. And I think it's helpful to remember that no one should really see your vision before you do. So there's going to be an element of failure involved, but how you respond to that determines whether you're going to be successful in the first place. So I think that's okay. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's inherent, but it's definitely necessary because you're going to get a lot of no's on the way, and that's just how it is.
Did you ever seriously regret the decision to leave the stability of banking to give this a go?
I wouldn't say regret. I certainly really hoped it would work out in the early days when I was making zero money and barely anyone was buying the product online. There was a lot of self-doubt in the early days. Self-doubt or doubt on the decision I had made from a commercial perspective is probably a better way to put it. But no, I don't think there was regret in that regard. I wouldn't be a happy person if I was still in that job. I'm very happy with not just the business, but the people I get to spend time with every single day. It's family to me. I've known a lot of these people for half a decade at this point, and they're still in the business today. So they're very important to me, and it makes the work more special.
And on that, I just want to read something to you actually, because I think in terms of what makes the work special, you've spoken a lot about how the drive towards really focusing on women's health and not getting distracted by would you sell to men. And there's something that when I read this, I then really started to understand what FreeSoul really stands for beyond, again, the numbers that you hit and the fancy packaging and all of that. I'll just read this to you. I was underweight for years and had hormonal problems. I've been diagnosed with PMDD and had terrible PMS symptoms. Taking FreeSoul's protein powder has helped me gain healthy weight, and my PMS has been much better ever since. Their protein powder has changed my life.
Super cool. That's exactly it, right? It's that positive impact. It's that ability for someone to just live their day that bit healthier, whether it's a big case like that or something smaller where it's as simple as I have more energy. That's that makes all the hard work worth it. So
When you started out and the impact that it had on serving your mum's needs,
mhm.
in those days when you're really starting off FreeSoul, did you know that you would have that kind of emotional connection with what you're building?
Yeah, I think I was lucky to know that from the early days. We ended up going to gyms across London, as I mentioned earlier. And because of that, I got to meet people every day who had taken the products and seen the benefit. And it's really humbling because my mom and I are not the overly emotional type. But when you hear these stories, it's hard not to get emotional.
Yeah.
And we still get emails to this day around people that had real struggles with their fertility journey. And because of the products that we have developed, they now have families of their own. That's awesome. Like, I don't think it gets better than that. So that's all the fuel that you'll need to get through hard times.
And just the other feedback which tied into what you were talking about your team,
Hmm.
someone sent this feedback saying, I'm AUDHD and still very new to understanding fitness, nutrition, and what actually works my body. I've had a few moments where I've needed support, including realizing that sensory wise, the electrolytes were a bit too intense for me. Every single time, the customer service team has met me with nothing but kindness, clarity, and solutions. I've recently lost my job, and navigating health while feeling financially and emotionally fragile hasn't been easy, but FreeSoul never once made me feel awkward or like a burden. It truly feels like you're talking to the girls, supportive, solution focused women who want you to succeed. That really screams that team culture that you're talking about.
Hmm.
And again, I got to experience that in person when I met some of the team, but you are way more than just a supplement product selling business.
Hmm.
What allowed you to create this culture? Where do you think that influence came from that made it become what this is, which is really supporting people through way more than just getting their nutrition, those additional nutrients in?
I think a lot of this stuff comes from the culture that you build internally. And ultimately, that came from a period of my life where I understood what negative culture was during my
Mm,
corporate job. So I think if you understand what that looks like and what that feels like and what some of the practices are that lead to it, it's very easy to do the opposite. And when the team is happy internally and they feel respected, they feel cared for, but they're still held to a high account because you want them to win, you want the business to do well, but you want them to be happy. It creates a natural desire to want to serve the customer really well. And everyone knows the story in the business. Everyone knows why this business was created. And because of that, the customer naturally sits at the center. We don't have to say it. It's not like a formal onboarding thing that we do. It just happens to be the case because everyone knows why we exist. And we launched this platform called Design by Her about a year ago now. And that's where the customer now formally sits at the forefront and at the very heartbeat of the business. So they come in, they describe the products that they like, they describe their pain points. And through all the various different bits of input that we take from the customer, they get to influence our product roadmap and our marketing and our branding. And it's really nice that it's come around officially to just influence the future of FreeSoul.
I also came across another image,
Yeah.
which I want to show to you, which is you holding what seems to be a monitor. Where was this image taken?
So that's in our first proper office. So I don't know if you can tell from that picture, but there's 6 desks there. And really it was 5 because if you sat in desk number 6 and someone opened the door, you'd get your head squashed a little bit. And that's when we grew out of that office and went into our office on Baker Street. And it felt like the business was starting to become like a thing. That was very cool because I remember the Dorset Street office where we were at that time. That was our first investment to real space. So being able to outgrow it was a
Yeah.
crazy feeling. And that's when the team felt really big when there were 4 or 5 people. Now there's 55 and it doesn't really feel that big anymore.
Was there any moment of it feeling surreal? Like, is this really happening?
Constantly. Every time we do a Free Solars meeting, I'm like, what the hell's going on? Every time, like every single time.
And I think that's part of it, right? I think it's easy to see people with the label, like the CEO, the co-founder, and you think oh, they've just got it all together. Why do they
Hmm.
look so done up, and how are they like this?
Yeah.
But when you speak to the person, you realize they're also just human, and they're probably going through the same things of like, what puts me in the position that
Yeah.
that makes me.
Even your warm introduction, I was like, is he talking about me? Like, why? I don't get it. It's very easy to be overwhelmed by these things, but I'm just very grateful to, have the privilege of being able to come in and do things like this. And hopefully people that are listening get the sense that it's all part of a journey and you just got to work really hard and cross your fingers for the rest.
Have you heard of Ketan Dattani?
No.
Great guy, not just because he shares the same surname as me, but I had him on as a guest recently, and he is really focused on sustainability for people from minority backgrounds.
Hmm.
And in our conversation, one of the things that we brought up was how the influence of sustainable practices and values has been in our generations for probably centuries, but at least going back 2 or 3 that we can recognize, right? So our ancestors practiced these kind of ways of being climate friendly before it was ever even a term that was coined. If you take the classic example of, and I've found out this doesn't just relate to South Asian households,
Hmm.
but if you open the fridge and then you open a margarine tub,
Yeah.
there's probably a 95% chance there's not actually margarine in there, right? And you make a joke about it, and when you're younger, at least for me, it's quite embarrassing if you have a friend who comes around who's not from that background, and they go to take margarine out and then they open it and there's yesterday's curry in there.
Hmm.
And that's just a typical example of something that when you're younger, you can see that as quite embarrassing. But then what we were exploring was the idea of how, well, actually, even though they didn't see that as a climate friendly, sustainable practice, that's not what they were trying to do by it. They were just being resourceful. It doesn't change the underlying outcome, that it was still something that was a sustainable practice that either directly or inadvertently got passed down. And my parents do it. And then, there will be times where I will naturally do it just because it's something that's been done. Or, my mum will give me a plastic container and say, don't throw it away, wash it.
Hmm.
That's an easy one to see how sustainability values are something that we can see as quite cool, that we should have embraced sooner. And now that the whole world is embracing through these things. When it comes to what you're doing, the interesting thing is, and what makes this conversation so fascinating, is that you're bringing some of our traditional cooking practices when it comes to the traditional spices and herbs that were used, the likes of turmeric, ashwagandha. There's loads of Ayurvedic ingredients that have such benefits that, again, our ancestors have been using for centuries, in most cases knowingly, to know what those benefits are. But then if you look at a traditional Asian or South Asian diet, it's very oily and fried. And the modern culture is moving to one that's ultra processed, quick to go, fried. And then you supplement that with, enzymes or tablets to then counter the impact. And a lot of the old things are seen as, grandma's remedies that are kind of seen as outdated. So what I see you as doing is something that's bringing back grandma's recipes in a form that's you're educating and also bringing it to a wider audience in a way that no one had done before.
I think with the ingredients, it all started with my grandma. So my grandma also qualified as a nutritionist in India, and every time I had an exam coming up, she said, have your ashwagandha. If I had a cold, she'll be giving me haldi and doodh, and
Yeah.
all these recipes are now in the FreeSoul range, which is so nice because it's been part of just my upbringing growing up. But I totally hear you in that there are ingredients in the Indian culture and conceptions which are just not aligned with what we understand. So I still have arguments with my grandma around dal is not protein, nani. It's more carbs than protein. So I don't think I'm fully aligned, but it's nice to see some of that stuff coming into Western culture where we can be consistent and really integrate it in our lifestyles. But I think there's still a gap that we need to bridge. Indian culture is really nice. I read the Ramayana a few years ago, and the Ramayana talks about sattvic food,
Hmm.
and that's basically plain food. I think I forget the phraseology, but it's like sattvic, tansik, and something else. Anyway, sattvic is all about plain food, and that's where dal comes into it, right? It talks about having food that is just very gentle on your body, and actually, that's true. Even simple stuff on my Whoop recovery, when I have a very light dinner, a vegetarian dinner full of plants and yogurt, my recovery shoots through the roof. So there's something there. I think we don't fully understand it yet. So it's going to be interesting to follow that one over the next few years.
And there's a quote that really ties in well with what ultimately I think FreeSoul stands for in part. Feel free to use it at any time. It is FreeSoul is the modern wellness industry rediscovering what our grandmothers already knew.
Oh, I love that. That's very cool. So it might be an our next campaign. I'll be tagging you at the bottom for that.
And before we finish, what really is next for you?
I think for us, something that I'm really proud of is the fact that we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We believe that we're having a very positive impact on the community. And for us, it's about expanding that. Could we expand that through more products? Could we expand it through different ways of getting the products out there to more women through different countries, through having different ambassadors to promote our message and really align with us on having that positive impact? All of those things are hopefully next for us. But something that I'm proud of is we're not trying to do something different. It's just amplify what we've already done.
I love that. Thank you. And to finish, how I like to close off the episodes is, I call it the legacy 5. And the idea is that these are questions that we may not have covered, but contribute to the idea of what is that legacy that you are really trying to build, but also what have you learned about your identity that you've gained from previous generations, but that you have an understanding of that you might also be trying to reinvent or break the cycle where necessary.
Can I throw a controversial one out there?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I believe in legacy,
Okay.
to be honest, because if you extend time long enough, over a long enough horizon, eventually there will be a point where no one remembers that you even existed. So therefore, to pursue something for the purpose of legacy, which in the definition that I understand it to be, which is so that people remember your name for the things that you have done, for me doesn't really motivate me in any way, shape or form, because over a long enough time, no one will. Like, who's your great-great-great-grandmother? You couldn't name her.
Very true, yeah.
Right? So what's the point in that regard? I think the point is, while you're here and now, do something good, productive, that benefits more than just yourself and your immediate family. It has to be wider. And that's not legacy, because I can guarantee barely any of our customers know who I am. And that's fine. It's still me facilitating that impact on their lives, which is something I'm really proud of. But that anonymity is powerful in itself.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that does come back to what does legacy really mean to the individual. And, you know, if you look back in history at the things that completely reinvented the wheel, not saying everyone has to do that, but you talk about the bring about of electricity or the internet or the automobile, right? These are things that redefined the way that the world works. I'll be surprised to go out and speak to millennials, even Gen Z, and for them to know the names of who invented the plane or who invented the vehicle to begin with, or railways. So I think that is a really interesting point of what does legacy actually mean?
Yeah.
And where do you fit into what you want to do with it? And I think any definition is okay.
Yeah.
If you just want to live for your decades here and not make a difference, but you're content and happy under that, then so be it.
Yeah. And it's also how you define difference.
Yeah.
You know, so all of these things come back to your why. What is it that you're trying to do? If you're just going through the motions, that can be quite depressing in itself. So it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't have to be business, doesn't have to be in a career. It could be something in between. But understanding why is so, so important.
So let's go on to the final 5.
Let's do it.
So question number 1, what's one belief that you've inherited that's helped you the most?
Work ethic matters.
And what's one belief that you've inherited that you're actually trying to unlearn or break the cycle of?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. What is one belief that I have that I'm trying to break that I inherited?
Or unlearn?
I don't know if this counts, but it sort of does. I think in the culture I grew up in, the time frame for investment into your business and into yourself is more short term. But being able to think decades into the future isn't necessarily something that I grew up with, and it's something that I'm trying to foster in myself and also into my team and my family too.
That the impact that you can make over the decades is something that we probably tend to underestimate.
In part, yeah, but also the fact that that actually might be in direct opposite to short-term outcomes. So the short term and the long term are often at odds with each other. And how you balance the two is not necessarily something that I have inherited in a belief system, but it's something that I'm trying to integrate into my own practices.
And question 3, what does trust mean to you? Or maybe,
Trust is having someone's back, right? So internally, so Lucy, who's our brand director, who's been with the business coming up to 5 years now, uses that phrase, you don't point fingers, which she really lives by. And I think other people in the business live by too. That for me is trust. It's just following through on your promises, not throwing people under the bus, mutual accountability. So, yeah.
And question 4, what would your grandparents be most proud of? And what's one thing they would challenge you on?
I think if my grandparents knew that I had a business, I had a team, that I work hard, that I am taking on responsibility, they'd be very happy, very proud. And I think the thing that they would ask is around short-term versus long-term investments. They'd look at the things that I'm doing today and question them, thinking of today, not necessarily focused on the future. And they might be right. That might be the benefit of wisdom, and I'm open to that. But that's the thing that I think they would question.
And finally, if your kids never mention FreeSoul when they talk about you, but describe you as being a certain type of man, what would you want that to be?
Will Ahmed, the founder of Whoop, said that he tried to disconnect himself from Whoop because when Whoop was having a great day, he was elated, but when it was having a terrible day, he felt depressed. And I think that holds true for most business owners. Like, my mood is directly correlated to the performance of the business, and I don't think that's healthy. And so for my kids to not know me as the person from FreeSoul would be totally fine, totally fine. As long as I'm dad who shows up, who's fun and who is loving and caring, I'm totally cool. So no, that would be great.
And if there's, in that case, for your kids, one message that you could put on maybe a script or a scroll or a piece of paper, a WhatsApp message, a text, that they had the chance to read that every year for the rest of their life, and you would want them to remember and try and follow this one message or live by this one message, what would that say?
So there's this person in the office called Charlie DeBacca, right? And Charlie is a senior graphic designer within the business. And whenever I'm at her desk, she's like a carpenter when it comes to her craft. She's very caring, very intricate, passionate. And when she's doing design, you get the feeling that she's doing her life's work.
Okay.
I've never told Charlie this, so in case she watches the episode or whatever, she might be a bit like, what the hell? Why didn't you say this? But I would love for my kids to have the same passion for their work as Charlie has for hers. It doesn't matter what they do. They could be in business, they could be in teaching, they could be in graphic design, they could be doing something totally different. But I would love for them to approach their work in the same way that Charlie approaches hers, because she gives the impression, and not even gives the impression, I understand from the way in which she works that she has found her life's work. And that's all that you can ask for as a parent. It doesn't, to me at least, it doesn't matter what that is, but as long as you find work that you are willing to really dedicate yourself to and care, I'm super happy, because that's the biggest blessing that I think you can have.
Well, in that case, Charlie, I hope that you do listen or watch this, because that is a true inspiration for anyone to lead by. Arjun, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anand. I really appreciate that.
You come from a lineage of business owners. You built a wellness brand with robust ingredients. And now I feel that, this personally for me was a great chance to really get to know the mind and I guess the soul and the real values of the person behind it. And I hope this gives a chance for the listeners to really understand that not only what FreeSoul is doing for people, but what you've done for the people at FreeSoul that allows it to do what it does. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Dude, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
that was really fun. Yeah, I loved it. Loved being on.
Thank you so much for tuning into that episode. If you did find that valuable or entertaining or inspiring in any way, then feel free to share it with others. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, not to make me happy, but every time you do that, it increases the scope of this video. And the bigger the scope, the better the quality of the guests and the production that you get. Also, comment on anything that was talked about. If there's anything you disagree with, agree with, want to expand on, then feel free to comment. I'll make sure to get back to you and pass the message on to him. Apart from that, here's another video for you to check out in case you can't wait till next week. Otherwise, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so, and I'll see you next time.